Get started. Dawn, are you able to?
Iana kia tata i kana me tuku pamo i miti. I tēnei anō te wā e pāe whakahui. Iana mātou ki a koe ke paramatanga ki rungi. Nā ki tanga ki a kingi. Tau te piro. Panina pauru nā rawa kore nā tāne mā wiwi. Nea noa mātou na inoi. Pai a mātou na moi moi a. Tātou na iwi whānui ki iro pango. Tuturu a whitu whakatau a kia ti. Au me hui e ai ki taura. Whakaro atu hoki. Whainui koe. Te tūmana ata ake.
Welcome, committee members, to the Waikato River Trust and Waikato Regional Council Co-Governance Committee for the 28th of June. Jackie? As the so happy to either go back and forth, make our way through, shall we? Nice. So we'll start with call for apologies. We do have apologies from Norm Hill. I know any other
apologies from Jocelyn. Leave of absence from Bidama at 11. He's got a
All right, and we also, Tippa, you have put forward early departure at 11:45, but I believe, according to my run sheet, if we if we get through things efficiently, we'll be ending the formal meeting around 11:15, and then continuing on with a more informal one after that. So. Do I have a mover, Dawn, and second, Bruce, for apologies? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right, confirmation of the agenda. Jennifer and Jackie? Oh, Dawn, thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right, disclosures of interest. I do have one disclosure I would like to make. So in my role as chair of Waikato Regional Council, I have engaged Norm Hill in a separate service provision, I suppose you'd call it. Norm is providing me with support in terms of cultural competence in Te Ao Māori, and we I don't see any conflict with our respective roles on this committee. We don't discuss items that are before this joint management committee. It's more region-wide, and like I say, Tau Māori support that Norm provides me, but do want to disclose that, so everybody there. Any other disclosures of interest?
Just a part-I think, for maybe James or governance. So a number of us, and we bring this up every meeting, have long disclosures that we've provided, and I wonder if, like, where they're recorded in the minutes.
If I could just add before Marley answers, I also noted there was an action list item which was about circulating the disclosures from Waikato Tainui, but I noticed there were only 2 of the members complete for the, but I'd mention that.
Morena koutou. So you may have noticed in the email that James sent last week with the agenda and supporting information that there was a list of disclosures for Waikato Tainui members, acknowledging that it only captured those for Jackie and Don. Because those are the disclosures that are currently, I guess, held by Waikato Tainui. However, I understand that a further email has been sent out to Waikato Tainui members to gather that additional information. And so when it does come to hand, we will certainly recirculate that list so that all of our committee members have that information. You'll note within the agenda we do refer to it and in the disclosure of interests part of the agenda. And so that is the way in which I guess we flag to the general public that we have a list of disclosures and we maintain it. We do the same for Waikato Regional Councillors as well.
So for the purposes of this committee, the interest register will include councillors' interests?
The councillors' interests
Or
are
they just
public,
registered somewhere? Okay.
yeah, they're publicly available on our website, and so we do link that to the agenda for anyone to access at any time. But just a reminder as well that when we do talk about disclosures of interest in our meetings, that is your opportunity to identify specifically whether or not you believe an interest does conflict with any of the items on the agenda. Kia ora.
So if I may, Marley, so my understanding, well, this is how I've been practicing, is you've got our big long list, so we don't need to reread that big long list every hui. And that's our disclosure really. So I wonder if the minutes could reflect that there's no change to the existing disclosures rather than that there's no disclosures.
All right. Do I have a mover in that? You happy to move, Jackie?
Yep.
Happy to second.
Second?
Can I just
Yeah.
ask a question? And somebody in the room will know better than me, but I would have thought that this section really is about the specifics of anything in our agenda today. And the other is a given. You know, we've all got publicly disclosed interests that are up on our website, and we don't need to go through that process. All we need to do for this meeting is there's something in the agenda, and I'm deferring to the man over the other side who probably knows the rules inside out and I don't. That's really what this bit's about, isn't it, Noel?
Yes. Yes. So we've got a mover and a seconder. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. It was Tippa, sorry. All right. Confirmation of the previous minutes. So we have, these are the minutes of.
Happy to move.
on the 2nd of March. We've got a mover and second, I'm happy to say, second in Councillor Clarkson. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right. So we'll move to our draft co-governance strategic work program. Molly is going to join us for that. So we are on page 20 for this. Yes.
Ia ki rangatira mā tēnā koutou. So you may recall that at our previous, you, the Co-Governance Committee, expressed a really clear expectation to staff that you would like to see a well-structured program that is focused on our shared priorities and also guided by a strategic work program. And so the purpose of this item in the report to, I guess, present to you a draft for your consideration, input and approval. This strategic work program certainly builds on the original strategic work plan that was co-developed back in 2018 by the Co-Governance Committee. That work plan was not only developed but monitored by co-governance over a 2-year period, and the actions within that original work program have been completed, or we're certainly well underway and in progress when we last reported on that initial plan. The actions within this current draft strategic work program for the 2023 to 2026 term includes or identifies a wide range of things, including community preparedness, social procurement, iwi capacity funding, Ture Whaimana reporting, the development of a land management strategy, and also the review of both the co-managed lands agreement and the joint management agreement as well. And a couple of these kaupapa are on our agenda today for further discussion as well. It's quite a long list of initiatives, and they have been selected as a result of having a look at the strategic priorities that have been identified by Waikato Tainui and also the Council to identify those things that will certainly benefit from our focus together. The initiatives will, once approved by this group, drive our agenda setting going forward. And so really the item today is an opportunity to present the initiatives to you, hear your thoughts about the initiatives that have been identified, answer any questions, and just offer the opportunity for input so that we can further refine the strategic work program to reflect those things that you would like to see within it. So if there's anything, we've been working together with Waikato Tainui, of course, to come up with a draft for your consideration. So I might add anything.
Kia ora tātou. Thank you, Marley. Yeah, so Marley's done the most of the heavy lifting. So what we've tried to do is give a perspective from our point of view in terms of the capacity of our team to contribute to the strategic work program. I think we did highlight community preparedness in climate change resilience in our list of priorities along with social procurement. And so we can assign, we'll be able to assign people to work with the council staff on those two. We had the land management strategy, co-managed lands workshop yesterday, and that's going to be talked about later. So there is a resourcing issue there from our side
for land management strategy and the review of the co-managed lands kaupapa. And the Te Ture Whaimana reporting tool, that's sort of something we've been talking to all partner councils about in terms of how do you demonstrate to us that you're changing the health and well-being of the river for the better. And it's something that Councillor Mahuta's been very consistent in challenging all of us about. So I suppose that's our feedback. There are, yeah, so it's probably too long of a list, but it's still stuff that we have to do. So how do we, I suppose the challenge is to decide how we manage and balance those priorities. That's all I'll say.
Are there any questions? And just to note, I do see Jocelyn, I do see you online. Thank you for joining us today. Any questions from committee members? Any comments? Tippa?
Kia ora, and thank you for the hard work done bringing us all together. I guess from experience, you're right, Mara, if we don't focus it, we might just keep looking at long lists. So I'm really keen for you, Marley, and the team after today's workshop to get down to, I guess, the 4 or 5 things that we as a committee are going to monitor, and know that underneath that is some other work that's happening, because we just won't get through it all, and we may do a whole lot of nothing if we don't focus. So that goes without saying. And I'm not saying for the tribe, or I mean, even for council. Just on the co-managed lands, though, I think that's got a runway behind it. So it should be an easier work program. 2 questions I have, though, about that is how do we improve in this next set of strategic work outcomes, the data that we are developing to make these decisions on, because it seems like for the years behind us now in the JMA, our data sources haven't improved. If I take co-managed lands, it's about there was some land information not accurately recorded or mapped or something in a previous report. So just wondering that we seek to deepen the data that's informing the JMA. And there's another example coming up shortly about tribal affiliation. And just wondering in terms of hazard mapping, Mara, if that's a GIS product that we have that can be transferred easily, is that something that's useful to the iwi? Because we've never asked for it, but hazard mapping around our maraes, or again, some of those places might be an easier give than some of the other things that you've noted in the list. But to your question earlier, Dawn, the community preparedness stuff, it's in the key actions there. So once we've got a work program that there, we want a strategic work program, that's where the iwi interfaces. Social procurement shouldn't require much work. That policy work's been done by other councils. Iwi capacity funding is a conversation that we've long had, and how to include and strengthen iwi capacity. And just with the collaborative projects, totally supportive of further work in Whangamarino, Whangapē and Waikato. But it seems to me, after all the efforts we put in there, all the work that iwi have done there, we're no further along in an improved management regime or the inclusion of iwi in the decision making around these areas. So that's what I'm really interested in, is what have we learnt that's going to feed the strategic work program, because it seems like the same way of doing things, and I'd expect an improved, more strategic, based on some learning behind us kind of approach. And then just my last comment is, yes, the Te Ture Whaimana reporting tool, and within the context that Te Ture Whaimana is currently being reviewed, that the tool stay responsive to that review and doesn't get fixed before the end of that process. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Any particular to that?
Thank you for the feedback, really useful. It gives us, I guess, confidence that we have got, the right things within the strategic program, and certainly good feedback to help us refine how we carry all of the kaupapa forward. Thank you, Councillor Mahuta.
Councillor Nicol?
Thank you. I really like the one page, see, and I can see from there how much more focused I can approach the expectations for this. When I look at our regional council strategy, I suppose there are ways of linking that through each of these that we've had. I did note, Mara, you mentioned before about climate, and I was just wanting to ask the question, do you feel like it's in there enough where you guys are at, whether that be adaptation or art? And lastly, I just had a question around, I believe there's a piece of work happening in the regional council about West Coast harbour management plans in the future, and I'm mindful of other settlement underway, not actually sure where that's up to. And just mindful to when I was looking at what might be missing here or what's relevant and when's that coming up, that was.
Kia ora, Councillor Nicol. I'll respond to your second question and then go to your climate question. Might hand that over to Mara to answer. The list that we've prepared certainly is not an exhaustive list of everything that we do together with Waikato Tainui, because that would be many, many pages
Of course.
of activity. And so it certainly doesn't suggest that we won't be working alongside Waikato Tainui in the development of a plan for West Coast. The treaty settlement that is related to the West Coast is under negotiation, I guess. And once it is nearing a place where the regional council starts to get involved in those discussions, is probably the point at which a focus may need to start appearing within a strategic work plan. And so perhaps it might be the next version of the strategic work program. I'm just thinking about the timing of these things. So that would be my suggestion.
That's very logical. Thank you.
Yeah. As for the climate stuff, community.
It's on everybody's, I think it's on everybody's priority list. From our perspective, we're gathering data and information at the moment, and we're reviewing what's occurred over the last couple of months. It's a very strong theme in the next iteration of our 5-year plan. And yeah, we don't have an approach yet, but everybody, our strategy team, our team are getting ready for those work programs. But I suppose it's about what are we going to do together. So we're expecting all our councils to work with us as well as the other agencies responsible. So at some stage, whether it's us or somebody else, that will pull us together and start having a collaborative conversation. So from our perspective, it's about our marae is where we start. So yeah, I don't know if any of cleverer people than me want to add something in there, but that's the response I can give you now.
Thank you. No, that makes perfect sense. And yeah, really noting that collaborative aspect to get that.
Sorry, and just in support of my earlier comment, that's where I was putting marae hazard mapping. As if we collect that information, is it a gift that we can feed into the tribes data for its conversation about climate? Again, I guess what is the data you need from us that can help that conversation is what I'm asking for, Mara, if you can, ka pai.
Ai, kia ora.
Okay.
Okay. Like I know a lot of our coastal communities have strong relationships with civil defence and emergency management because they have to. So I think, bringing those agencies together, and I know the team are working on this, so that, regional council with your flood hazard data, are one part of that overall conversation, but you know, that preparedness piece of work is, yeah, rather than waiting for it to happen and then dealing with the consequence, I think there's a lot that can be done collaboratively, sharing information to get a better understanding of the current risks as they exist and vulnerabilities and what needs to happen to best prepare us. Like I know for one of my marae, under certain rainfall conditions, we're on a bit of an island. So while we might prepare ourselves to be the sort of centre, under certain conditions, there'll be no getting to our marae. So, you know, just working together, I guess, to help us better understand the vulnerabilities that exist around our marae under a whole range of hazards, not just rainfall, although that's the biggest one that we deal with. I think it's really a really positive step. And since there's lots of motivation to do it at the moment, getting those resources to support it would be really, really wonderful as well. I know within civil defence here in Kirikiriroa and the team have experienced this, there's been a real lack of Māori representation in those sort of key roles within civil defence and emergency management. And so a whole lot of opportunities missed as well as frustration created. So any leverage that regional council can, you know, advocacy that you can also have there. I know that the civil defence controllers are looking for iwi to support them. Would be useful.
And if I may, just it follows on from that, the unfortunate irony of the large events that hit at the start of the year had pulled away resources from our local climate risk assessment, which is then therefore behind schedule. But it's just the nature of having those experts being needed for the response as well as the proactive work. We're looking currently at how we can resolve that so that that piece of work does progress.
So that's one of the things that will come out of the strategic planning process in civil defence. So we will need someone from there to speak into that. Thank you.
Kia ora through the chair, kia ora tipa. Yeah, just to add about the connection of us to WRC and the data, and that how we could use that together, but also the learnings from different projects with regards to private land ownership and some of those projects and what might be some of those barriers that we might need to understand to share from a Waikato Tainui point of view, so that we're actually doing that mahi tahi and checking in what are some of those barriers so that we can work collectively through that. And I think a part of that is probably having membership on those different spaces to enable that discussion, sharing of the intent of well-being. So if we're talking about well-being, oranga whenua, oranga wai, oranga taia, oranga tangata, that there's a different perspective that can be brought, sort of just like what you're saying, Jackie, and where would that actually sit? But also acknowledging a lot of the outcomes, Marley, that you've actually got in here with the FTEs and the procurement stuff with all the different people around their table. So meeting a lot of those targets and exceeding in some of those spaces. So just acknowledging all of that mahi. But then, yeah, it's that whole mahi tahi and how do we do that because it's a reset. I think what Waikato Tainui did, we did really well when we went down to Wairoa. And there might be some learnings that could be shared when all of the crew went down there and done some mahi, and that was off the back as an iwi approach. And at the well-being of the whānau down there and the whenua as well. So there might be some sharings that could be beneficial to share with WRC in and around that space. And just sort of interested in the recent stuff that's happened down there. You know, if that were to happen to us here, now are we prepared? What does that look like? So yeah, just bringing that forward really. But kia ora for the mahi, WRC and Waikato Tainui.
Kia ora. Thank you for the report, Marley. It's good to have this in front of us. And having a look through the the draft strategic work program, I did refer back to the work that's been done previously, because I think that that was really awesome mahi, and it set out a whole lot of things that we want to do, but recognised we needed to prioritise what we did do. So I think we should pick that up, because a lot of these initiatives, which are probably the new priorities, do fit within that framework. But there's some really good stuff in the previous work that's been done that shouldn't be lost. And I expect that some of those previous work programs or work packages have become BAU for regional council. And it'll be good to acknowledge that, so that we're showing that, I guess, the journey that we're going on, that we've had a program, we've achieved a whole heap of things. There's a whole lot of initiatives that were identified that are actually BAU now. And if they're not, then I guess feed those into other programs. For example, the taonga species protection plan, that should be part of another program, but just showing those linkages. So I'd be really keen to, I guess, pull the two together. And as I think Tipper said, for you and our team, Mara and the Taiao team, to work through a prioritisation exercise, because what will need to come a lot after that is, I guess, funding and a program for delivery. So I think the framework that was set up previously, which was just on an annual basis, was a good one. So it gave us a reasonable amount of time to get the work done, but actually gave us something to monitor progress against. When it comes to some of the key actions, I imagine there'll be a whole lot of other, I guess, projects that sit under each of those where we can really start chipping away. The other thing that really jumped out to me was the draft report that has been completed for the Te Ture Whaimana progress. A lot of those measures sort of align with some of these initiatives. So how can we pull the two together where they align? So those were my initial comments. Be good just to get some of these long-running initiatives like the land management strategy, like the Te Ture Whaimana reporting tool, just prioritised, done, dusted, and just as part of BAU. I did want to say around iwi capacity funding, I think that's a really important element, and I didn't see anywhere the need to inform long-term plan funding for regional council. So as Mud has said, we're a very lean team, and we've sort of said at every hui, our team are very lean. They deal with a whole lot of local authorities and private enterprise and regional councils. And so finding ways to, I guess, fund our people or people appointed by the iwi to do some of this work is going to be really important. We have pūtea to do, I guess, what we've prioritised, but there's some of this work that we can't fund. So we're really looking to inform your next long-term planning process so that the Te Tiriti partnership can be fully recognised, including through capacity building, your own staff and pūtea to support that input in a meaningful way to come through that planning process. Got it.
Don.
That involve Waikato Tainui, Waikato Regional Council, Department of Conservation, and so just bringing that to the fore in the sense that so with regards to the conflict of interest, I attended a meeting on the weekend, and it sort of just come to my attention that this sits in this space, but I'm asking the question, how do we connect? Because it connects here. So that's why I'm sort of bringing the whakaaro here, because we're all at that table, and we're just sort of monitoring stuff. So I'm just bringing that to the space so that we actually have us, Waikato Tainui, WRC, and what does that look like? Well, then it actually ticks off. We're all working together, trying to demonstrate in the public interest that it's not just a bilateral kind of a mahi, but it's a multi-layered approach. So just wanting to leave that there, because there might be a lot in there that you guys know that would be helpful for us to know, and how can we actually support. Kia ora.
Yeah, kia ora tātou. Probably further to that, the MOAs signed in 2011 between the 5 groups, including WRC and us, probably needs to have a look, because you see some of the names on there and they're no longer around the table and no longer have to, no longer within the discussion. And so a refresher of that, I think, achieves half of that story, because the other half is the action that comes from it. And so maybe a relook at what that was and what that is for us, and now be in action for that. It's a suggestion, Madam Chair.
All right. Any other comments on the paper?
So can I just, Pamela, sorry, because the sound kept breaking up. Can I be clear on what's been noted as actions from this part? If Mali or Mara can note what actions have been taken for this part. I missed part of the last discussion, that's all.
Kia ora tapa, a couple of things that I've noted down under the collaborative projects is the opportunity for the projects that we focus on through this strategic work program to be broader than just projects that include the two of us, Waikato Tainui and Waikato Regional Council. For example, Whangamarino, which certainly includes other agencies and is a project that will be focused on immediately as the first project that we look at together, because of how critical it is to our work going forward for both agencies and others. That this strategic program and governance certainly offers the projects that will get underway with all the other agencies a governance lens, which is useful, a co-governance lens, which is even more useful. And I guess at some point we may want to think about whether it's necessary to bring the other agencies to a governance table. But I guess these are things that we will need to work through as we start focusing in on the Whangamarino, for example. Is that helpful? And then there was an MOU that Mara might have a better insight into.
We've got to look at the GIS capacity on the iwi side so that we can include the hazard mapping, because I don't believe, I might have to defer to Tūhoro and our strategy team around our GIS capacity. So that's an action for us. I heard from Jackie, what have we learnt from all the projects we've done before, and what do we bring forward from the last strategic? And I know that we've done some of that work, Mali and I. I'm very interested in what Tipa's saying about the conversation she's having in the CD space, because we haven't been asked to contribute yet as iwi. So I'm looking forward to that, because we have said that the civil defence response in some of our areas in the rohe wasn't adequate. So yeah, and yeah, be interested to be part of that kōrero, Tipa. Thank you. And the refresh of the MOA was what I heard from Huirama. And for us as management, it's about now taking this this plan, which I assume that we're going to agree with, and doing some analysis on capacity, what's already in our work program and what do we need extra capability and capacity for. That's an action for us. So those are the actions I heard.
Awesome. Thank you
Just
both.
a few more, sorry. So for you guys to work through and prioritise the program, just recognising you can't do it all, to potentially prioritise those initiatives that have been on the list for a long time and that are nearing completion, to review the previous strategic work programs and identify which of those items are now BAU for regional council, and close them off and report that, so that we all acknowledge the work that's been done. To potentially look at pulling through the common elements that are identified as measures in the Te Ture Whaimana monitoring tool, because if we can kill two birds with one stone, awesome. And to, after you've identified capacity and resourcing needs, to use that to inform the upcoming regional council long-term planning process.
Nice.
Can I just,
Ka
Yes.
pai. Tēnā tātou.
just one of the messages there was the learnings from the private land ownership interaction, how we might be able to be a part of and supporting that movement and being a part of those communities.
Great. All right. So noting all of those actions that we'll take away from that, do I have a mover to receive the report and approve the draft strategic work program as distributed? Was that,
Can we amend it?
sorry?
Because there's going to be one more version, it sounds like. There's going to be a refinement of the strategic work
Right.
program as a result of today's
Okay.
actions. Is that
So shall we just receive the report then? Shall we
happy to do that, Madam Chair?
get rid of, so we'll lose 0.2 on that and just receive the report, noting that there will be further reporting. So I've got a mover in Jennifer and a second in Dawn.
Through you, Madam
Yeah.
Co-Chair, can we put a time frame on that report back? So I wonder if there is a second one that says, the revised work program will be presented back to the next committee
Next
hui
committee,
for approval.
yeah. Yes. All right, so we will, how about we say that the revised strategic work program well, we'll see. We'll see if the revised program is approved by by the joint committee at that stage. All right, so just checking with the mover in Jennifer and the seconder in Dawn. Are you happy with that wording? All right, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, we now move on to item 8. This is on page 25. An update on Ture Whaimana reporting tool. And Ed, is Molly presenting? Is Ed joining? Or Ed is just supporting in the back row, are you? But
Ed will have quite a starring role very
Oh,
shortly.
well, then move forward.
But before I do hand over to Ed, and just very quickly, because I know there's a lot on the agenda to get through, just very briefly, this is a critical item for the committee. It certainly was a signal to us at the last week. And so that is the reason we've put together a bit of an update on progress made to date. The last time you received an update was in 2022, and at that stage we had completed a gaps analysis. Since then, we have had initiated some engagement across the organisation with staff, and also with River Iwi and the Waikato Regional Waikato River Authority, Aroha mai. We would like to undertake some further engagement with those groups to really refine additional measures to fill the gaps where gaps have been identified, but also to have a discussion about an appropriate reporting tool. And so there are two options identified. The first is an integrated tool where all agencies report into that tool. And of course, the second option is separate reporting by all agencies. We are joined by Ed Brown today because in the background, the environmental monitoring team have developed such a tool. It's a BI dashboard and it pulls together state of the environment reporting. And so should we land on a separate reporting tool being the preferred option after further engagement with you, co-governors, but also River Iwi and the Waikato River Authority, then this tool could potentially form the basis. It certainly will require further development to include all of the measures that we would want to report on, but it certainly gives us a basis and we'd like to share it with you. So I'll hand over to Ed. Kia ora, Ed.
Kia ora koutou. I'll just share my screen.
Just going to get you to bring that mic a little bit closer. We do have some members online, just making sure everybody can hear.
So this work comes from the environmental monitoring team, collecting a lot of scientific information, and often we're reporting this as an end result of health, and it's either in water quality, ecology, but it's often done in separate domains. Behind a lot of this information is a great amount of detail that's taken by staff when they're in the field. We wanted to improve the communication that we were having when we're at JMA meetings, which is often talking about a location of monitoring, but so much all the information behind it. And so we wanted to bridge that gap and to make to highlight this wealth of information that could also support any work that's happening on assessing the health of a river system. In 2019, we had a contractor who looked at the literature for us. There's a lot of work happening around the country, around different ways you could represent this information. A lot of findings come back to there's sort of generally 4 PO or areas that you focus on, which is around the experience when you're at a location, and this is particularly focused towards river locations, food source, how is the ecosystem, and the water quality. And under those 4 PO, we have a lot of information that we collect, and some of it's presented here, such as under the KAI, the obvious ones from our fisheries surveys that we do each year. So we're going out measuring the health of fish. We do electric fishing, net fishing, and we have a network across the whole region. The Y with water quality, each month we're gathering water quality samples at least 150 locations across the region. And under the ecosystem, we have an invertebrate survey, we do lake surveys, we're looking at the plants, we're taking a lot of observations around the amount of shade, not just the invertebrates in the stream, but the shape of the stream bed, the degree of erosion. And yes, so there's a lot of information that's getting collected behind the scene, and how can we report this and put it in a sense which gives a more holistic view. And a key one that we were after was more engaged conversations, particularly in our JMA operational meeting. So to test that approach, we first started with Raukawa, who were also undertaking some work at that time. So we wanted to have them to test our approach. So we had on-site meetings. We talked through the, under those 4 PO, the matters that we were collecting and how we were rating them. And yeah, so we worked through that and received feedback, and we've now incorporated that. One of the big issues was when you do this work, often it's a written report, and that's stagnant in time. And so what we've done over the last year or two is just seeing how we can make that electronically reported. Attempt to show that. And so an approach here, which I'll just show on a slide, particularly for the Raukawa, we can do this anywhere. It's just a timing issue as we work through all the data and develop it. And so this here is just showing a Power BI screen. I'll jump out of here. This was just an emergency if the next live demonstration doesn't work. Sure, it's going to. And so this is our Power BI screen. So when we're taking those 4 areas of interest on the river, so we talked about the experience felt at the site, the food resources, the ecosystem, and the water quality, we've grouped those together in this current slide to give a total score. And so right then that gives, as you can see by the color grading, green for excellent, fair, and then down to good. The Power BI reporting, just straight off, you can click on this donut chart and it'll update and just show you the sites which are excellent. There were 8% or 4 of them assessed in that area. The good sites and the fair sites. And so at that stage, you can just start to click around and get some interaction. That's as a total score working across the domains. If you have an interest in the experience felt at a location, then you can look at that. Some of the assessments that you might go, you can click on an individual site, bring up its details here, and you can drill down into that in more detail. And so some of the aspects around experience felt, for example, at this site, landowner permission is needed. And so areas where there's permissions needed, so this is from when WRC staff want to go there, they have to phone up, get permission, and then go. And so that's rated as it gets a lower score. So that would be more towards the fair or poor. Compared to a site that was publicly available, you can just walk on, that would come across as an excellent score. Sites which are dominantly in pasture are rated poorer than those which are in native vegetation. And so the aspects that we have here, such as access, land use at the site or land use in the catchment, those are all pieces of information that should be done in collaboration, and then the scoring which comes with that. So those are pieces of work that if this was expanded, you'd sit down with key people from each rohi and work through those. This isn't so much a WRC is saying this at the moment, we're just testing the approach through this Power BI of reporting some of the information we have. Some of the other aspects such as food resource. So a lot of the areas above Karapiro Dam will have a lower rating for food resource because of the barriers, and they also would get a low score if they have a high number of exotic fish compared to native aspects like that. And so, yeah, it provides a tool where you can drill down into the 4PO, you can look at particular aspects, and any of the information under each of these could be expanded. I know the topic today is around wider vision and strategy reporting. This is just showing one avenue of it, but the, I guess, other matters of importance, if there's information behind that could be reported, then it could be added to this and presented visually. And I will end there because it is a tool we're basically best clicking around and working with, but it was just to give a highlight and maybe if there's questions. Thank you.
Any questions for Ed? Bruce.
Thanks, Ed. So I'm interested in how this connects to, so in many of the reports that we've received today, critical facts about outputs are listed. So number of plants planted, area of fence, extent of planting, etc., etc. How is this going to close the loop to lead to a process where we are actually measuring the restoration outcome and whether or not what we're doing is making a difference?
This tool, if we've got information behind the length of fence, number of plants, and we can show that spatially, it's got a location, then we can add that as a, could be a restoration PO. And then all the factors that are important would be put there with information reported as one approach. I do realise what I presented here doesn't answer the question that you've asked. Because we were initially starting at a different question a few years ago, this is just to highlight anything that we have information behind and there's numbers. Power BI has this functionality where it can be shown as a map or a table. It can be shown if it's meeting a target you would hope, and it's in a form that people individually can click and drill down to.
May I add as well to help that we certainly intend to undertake further engagement to really refine and define and agree what additional measures should be reported on going forward. So there's certainly still a significant piece of work required beyond today to, one, identify those measures, and then two, I guess, put in place the processes required to be able to gather that information on a regular basis and report on it. And so this tool isn't, I guess, presented to say, yay, we've done the job done. It's really just an opportunity to see a reporting tool that we can potentially build on to deliver the full reporting that this co-governance committee is looking for.
There is a comment from Paul in it online that says numbers need not be quantitative either. Scales can be evaluated too. So I don't know, Paul, if you wanted to make any further comment
Makes sense.
to that.
Yes, so that's Paul Kennett, who's in our data team, who's at home with bronchitis.
Oh.
So hopefully he's not going to overwear his
Might
voice.
not want to make any comments.
But Paul's putting across that a lot of the scales can be based on values as well, rather than just numerical.
Thank you for putting that out, and get well soon. Neville, yes?
Just to add on to that comment, my understanding is it's experiential reporting. So what do you witness, what do you see, what do you feel? So it's more of I guess, a perception of MODI and how it might be measured in the environment, and it has an input into the overall criteria for measurement. So it's not just those values that you can see like fencing and riparian planting, but also includes what you see in terms of life in the river, the MODI of the river, et cetera, et cetera. So I think those are the components that are exciting and interesting beyond the scientific data and evidence, and provide also, I would think, a role for iwi, hapu, even whānau to contribute on an ongoing basis and talk about that MODI of that water body is improving or otherwise.
Don?
Yeah, kia ora, just Mihi ana ki ngā mahi. And it's good to actually see what Power BI can do and how you're applying it. I was sort of interested really in fair, excellent, good. And just the, what's that?
The
criteria.
criteria.
Yes, there is a detailed report behind this, which I can make available. I didn't bring that today because it's more about the concept of the Power BI rather than the. My view and our view going forward is every rohi that we do this with, that's the discussion which is made, because it won't be a regionally consistent, and so it's
I just, when I was reading it, it had good, then it had excellent. Yeah, so I don't know if it was a hierarchy of where does fear sit? Is fear after good or before good, and then excellent is fear? So it's just when I see it, I'm thinking.
fear is score because that has everything.
Oh, is it a nice word for poor? No.
Yes, that is one of the limitations with Power BI. Sometimes we'll put things in alphabetical order, that sort of order, rather than fair is after good.
And why I'm interested in that is when I actually see it, the geographic areas that are in those different spaces, then I can actually start to associate that meaning to that particular land area. And then it could actually possibly give me an understanding that there's something that's actually affecting it more in one area, depending on what the dots are. And it leads me to another line of questioning and asking, and probably just to be supportive. So when I actually look at it in a visual, then I might be able to be a contributor to whatever articulation is being supported.
You've hit the nail on the head of exactly what we were hoping to achieve when we have our joint management operational meetings, to convey and look at such as the map up there and someone say, why that particular site does it have this result? And then to start that conversation and then to understand all the things we're collecting or other doing in that area.
Kia ora.
I've got a question online with Jocelyn.
Kia ora. Just, I guess, Pātai, I see that the year you've got data from different years. Does that mean that you're able to capture, or you've got current data for that? I'm just wondering if this becomes an analysis, including, because I'd like to know over the last few years what that would look like, and also the impacts of weather, planting, reparation, restoration, to see whether or not that's been factored in for that, because I see some on there, it says fair or even good, excellent for some of the streams. So just, if that's going to be included in there, because as my understanding, this is just like in a draft for information that's going to be presented.
And so, yes, we do have information over time, and in the internal report that went with this, Mark Hamer did all this work. He's currently on his leave, so covering at a higher level than the detail he had put in. But he looked at 10 years worth of information, and to see if also you could see changes in some of these, good or poor scores through time. One of his ambitions was to even do a page if we were to look back 50 or 100 years based on people's values or knowledge, and then to feed that in to say, to see change over many, many timescales. And in regards to, I guess the purpose of being here today is to show that, yes, we could add extra PO, which could be the restoration work and other works, and Power BI could be the tool to show that. So those are the next endeavours.
All right. All good, Jocelyn? All right, we've got Councillor Nicol, then we have Councillor Mahuta, then Co-Chair Jackie. Councillor Nicol.
Thanks, and thanks, Ed. Yeah, it's cool to see Power BI. From talking with you and others, I understand it is a very good tool, very credible tool that could be used for this process also. So thanks for showing us. From what the papers directed us about giving feedback, my first impressions from reading through the paper is that there's a question there around, do we want to have the evaluation of how well progress is being made towards Te Ture Whaimana one tool that everyone feeds into, or whether it is lots of disparate places where it gets. My feeling is that with the importance of the Waikato River region, other things I've understood from Te Ao Māori, or even just when I see other initiatives around the world and around New Zealand about, for example, personhood for Ture and down in Whanganui, that it would make more sense to have a single place to put all this information, to give it that respect of being looked at in one way. But I'm mindful that there are lots of logistical, political, other challenges. So sometimes stage one and the final stage all look different, but my personal feeling was I like the idea of one tool. And when I look at the objectives that there are to meet, as I was reading the items that would be measures, they did stick out to me as being things that are currently being done, mainly regional council, but I did see that there is definitely a lot of potential for what else could be done to meet that. And I have no idea what people's feelings are around natural capital assessments. One thing though, I think would be really fascinating to achieve objective G, or to show demonstration towards that goal of recognition and avoidance of adverse cumulative effects on the well-being of the river, would be to have a system dynamics piece of work done to help people understand the interrelationship of every river. We did that under the Climate Action Committee droughts, just as an example, which allowed people to look at how things interact, which then allow you to analyze how things are contributing towards them. And then I noted just a few little things around. Sometimes there was a rural focus, and sometimes there was more of a Hamilton focus on some of the parts that were listed to show progress towards an objective. So just wanting to point out that you want to capture both at times. And I might leave it there for the moment, but I just thought I'd give you my feedback from just having the paper.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Councillor Mahuta? I see you've taken your hand down, but.
Yeah,
okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ed and the team, for your report. I think overall, as long as we keep that the openness about the review of Te Ture Whaimana, I support the approach. Just with regards to your kōrero, Neville, about perhaps Māori indicators, I just note there was significant amount done in the first 10 years of the river settlement about different indicators. So wanting to see if those start from there and then move it out, if that's what the Kaitiaki want. Just noting work done by one of our rangatahi, Manawa Kōkiri Huirama, who again, this is some years past now, presented potentially to Kaitiaki a taniwha model for our end of the river, because we do acknowledge the placement of our taniwhas and their well-being. Just put that one out there for Waikato specific rohe-based well-being modelling. And to that point, wanting to think about the role of Kaitiaki going forward. Now we have them because intergeneration, their transmission has happened outside of council or anybody helping. I'm not sure how what our give is in requiring all this information of Kaitiaki, because we're not going to feed that puna and we're not going to grow those Kaitiaki, and that's what I would like to see, I guess, in the plan, and only Waikato Tainui can give us that view. So I'd like us to be open to that. In terms of the plan itself, how in the next decade can iwi or Kaitiaki become the active monitors of Te Ture Whaimana, because as we've seen in Taupo and other areas, Rotorua as well, where the kaitaki have become part of the monitoring, it has caused that relationship to be expressed, and our current plan doesn't provide for any of that. So again, if that's what, assuming that the iwi would like a role in that, again, funded as we do in other places, I think we need to look at that as a way forward over the next decade of monitoring. Tēnā koe.
Thanks for that. Co-Chair Jackie?
Kia ora Ed, kia ora Mali. Thank you for the report. I think the Power BI demonstration that you've given us is really powerful in terms of being able to spatially sort of show what the state of the catchment is for different parameters. So I'm really supportive of a GIS type platform that can be accessed by everyone ultimately. I'm on a similar sort of thought to Jen around ideally we would have one place where everyone fed into, but in reality that will take a lot of effort to get off the ground. So if we can formulate a platform that's useful, identify and develop specs, I suppose, on the things that are monitored, even if they slightly vary across the rohe, I think that'll be a really useful place to start or continue this work. And that information, those specs, can be shared with others who are collecting the information as well. So they don't have to go through the same kōrero or exercise of talking to our kaitiaki and iwi to develop those things. So developing those monitoring standards, I think, would be really, really helpful. On the actions that Marley talked about, so doing further engagement to finalise the approach and some of the indicators, I support that. I also think that the potential measures do need to have a focus on how we're going to measure change, as opposed to, you know, X number of trees, X kilometres of fence. You know, what measures can we use that are going to pick up on the trends? You know, are those things making a difference or not? To Tipper's point, I think some of the objectives, particularly those around restoration of the relationship of Waikato Tainui with the river, so providing for our people to be resourced to do the monitoring in our own area, you know, would go some way to achieving part of that. So if we can have that as a specific measure or metric, then that's something that can be pulled through to your planning, funding and implementation. I haven't gone through the measures that are in here in detail, but I think it's, you know, we've got to start. We're not going to get perfection straight from the jump. So let's start and start improving as we move forward. So thank you for the report, supportive of the recommendations. I think that just so we're moving forward, we probably need to start with ourselves or regional council initially, and leave the door open, use the forums that exist to share the mahi that's happening with other agencies. So for example, with local authorities, the future-proof forums, you know, an obvious mechanism to use to share with other practitioners just from local authority perspective. And there'll be others that you have with other government agencies that can do the same. I think talking to our whānau, which I'm sure Jaden and the team will direct you toward, is going to be really important to landing those indicators, so that we're starting from the right place. But thank you for the report, supportive of the recommendations. Thank you.
All right, if there's no other questions, we get that motion up on the screen. This will be a motion just to accept the report. I have a mover for that motion, and Jackie, and a second, and Bruce. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right. So we've got a couple of items left, and we're a wee bit behind time, but I do want to acknowledge we've been joined in the of the room by a couple of observers, very important observers. We've got our staff member, Mishwela McDonald, and also we have been joined by 2 year 13 Rotatuna High School interns, Jordan and Nuri. So welcome. They were anxious to see co-governance in action. So, so thank you for joining us, and I'm sure that at the end of your time with us, you'll either want to be politicians or fantastic policy advisors, all of the good stuff. So thank you for joining us. All right, we'll move on to the next item, which is shovel-ready projects update, and we are joined by Carrie Nielsen. Nielsen. Welcome, Carrie.
Tēnā koutou, thank you. So through the co-chairs, this is a report that had been requested as a sort of semi-regular update, I think 6-monthly or annually update on progress and delivery of the shovel-ready restoration projects within the Waikato Tainui Rohe. I think we're just taking the report as being read, but just a couple of key things that to point out is just that 4 of the 5 projects will be finishing in the next 3 to 6 months. So it's hard to believe that we're, COVID doesn't seem that long ago, but coming to the end of those projects. To date, just over 55 FTE have been created through the delivery of these projects, with just over 40% of those positions filled by iwi Māori. And more than 670,000 plants planted, 345 hectares of land retired, significant amount of river erosion control works completed, obviously the bund and weir installed at Lake Kimihia. And yeah, so happy to take questions on paper.
Bruce.
Thanks for the report, Carol. Interested in what sort of process is occurring in relation to archiving on air, how many timings, so that when these projects cease, you might be able to come along and some further work on understanding the impact they have had on the land.
Yeah, so just through the co-chairs, all of our project work is recorded in GIS, and so it's mapped and so quantified. So and certainly for each of these individual projects, we have had to provide that data to external funders as well. So we can provide maps and quantities of deliverables, project specific or on a whole. Yeah.
So where will that information be archived? Who will be the holder of that?
So as with all of our catchment management projects, that's every year that information is mapped. So as the work is completed, it's put into our internal GIS mapping system. So everything up until last week will be in there. And so that can be provided to anyone who requests information on the spatial data associated with those projects. And that applies to all of our catchment management projects outside of shovel ready as well.
Seems like it's an obvious place for some follow it up at some point and encourage some local education providers to get some students to do some theses or other sorts of research on what has been the impact of shovel ready. Thanks for your information.
Yeah, it's a difficult one because in the scheme of everything that's been done in the catchments, it's just one of the many pieces. So I think it would be quite hard from an environmental perspective to single that out. But of course, we do have our catchment environmental management monitoring programs, which have been aligned to some of the catchments that we've done a lot of the shovel-ready work in. So there's long-term monitoring, like in the Matahuru, Kaniwhaniwha, Karapiro catchments, where a lot of this work has been done. So perhaps cumulatively with the other work that ourselves and others are doing over time, we will be able to determine that impact.
Great. Councillor Mahuta?
Kia ora, Kerry, and thank you for the report. I just note in trying to find opportunities to record more against what we're achieving under Ture Whaimana. At point 12 of your report, you note that council's not required by funders to collect information on tribal affiliations. I guess the JMA requires it because it promotes that we're fulfilling Te Ture Whaimana. And again, objective B is that we note we've helped Waikato Tainui increase their relationship. So I just want to understand the difficulty about asking the iwi affiliation question because it helps us, helps the iwi in terms of their planning of who these kaitiaki are and how many they're growing or not in different areas. So that's first question. And then the second one's probably has been asked in these meetings, but I'm not sure if you were here. But on the what we fund, the work we fund in catchments, and I note this from my Tumon Council, say with our smaller initiatives funding and our big initiatives funding, very few marae or kaitiaki groups apply to council for that support. And that's their prerogative, but wanting to understand maybe what some of those hurdles are. And it's been asked here before that when we scope up catchment-based works that we seek co-funding for, how many Māori land blocks or Māori-owned land, not necessarily iwi-owned, have we promoted to projects and things like that, Kerry? Because we wouldn't know, it doesn't come up. Thank you.
Okay, so just through the co-chairs for the first question around tribal affiliation. So yeah, it was quite complicated. We some employers were a bit reluctant to give that much detailed information. It was a bit of a change for them when they're providing invoicing. We were asking them to provide essentially the name or a code for each employee, and whether what we were asked to provide was ethnicity, gender, whether they were employed prior to the start of this project or not, their age. And so there was a range of things we were asked, and there was a bit of resistance. It was just very different for people to provide that kind of personal information about individual employees, and then the number of hours they had individually worked on the project. So it took a little bit of time.
Again, all I wanted to know is who I can say is Waikato that worked them.
Yeah, so we weren't required to report that through Shovel Ready. We did ask generally for the iwi Māori workers about tribal affiliations, and as I noted in the paper, most of them, well, they all basically confirmed that the majority of their Māori staff whakapapa to Waikato Tainui, but we didn't seek information on hapu or that sort of thing.
I know, but I can't trust that someone knows the difference if the person themselves hasn't declared it in a way. Yeah. So again, not wanting to disparage any of the providers, but saying that Shovel Ready required tribal sign-off or tribal support. So by implication, I would have assumed that it was procured under Te Ture Whaimana no matter who funded it. So if that's not the case, how do we make it the case in the future, Kerry? Because the tribe does need to know who it's growing in this space, or who or how many head count.
Yeah, that's a fair point. We certainly can say that the 5 iwi enterprises that have been employed regularly throughout the delivery of the project, they were all owned by Waikato Tainui tribal members. So it's something that we could seek further information on if that was desired.
We want to improve data. That's been a theme of the meeting, and it is desired because we want to say that we're moving the dial on objective B of the Te Ture Whaimana. So happy for you to talk to Marley and Mara offline, but we need to show numbers now. It's not a nice to have, it's a requirement going forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then with respect to your second project in terms of marae and hapu applying for funding, so I'm not sure about the formal funding applications that we have, Natural Heritage Fund, etc., but we do support and we can provide this information. A lot of outside of Shovel Ready, a lot of co-funding to projects that have been led by marae and whānau. Can certainly provide an update on that at a future meeting if it's required. We'll fund those through our catchment management programs. Generally, we're looking, we like to see that iwi are leading the project themselves, and we'll provide technical advice and funding to help them get funding from others.
Yeah.
s-
No, that
so
would be a
I-
good piece of report back to the JMA. Thank you. That would be helpful, Kerry.
Cool. And then in terms of the Māori-owned land, so for the shovel-ready project, for the largest funded project, the Ngāwai or Waikato, the focus was on climate resilience and steep land. And so we have mapped all of the Māori-owned trust blocks in the region that have land that classifies as steep, so class 6, 7 and 8. Most of those
I
occur
think
in
that's
the...
Waipa, Kerry.
Ngāwai or Waikato is the name of the shovel-ready project.
Yeah, but
I know the
okay.
act is Ngāwai Waikato, but what the project being referred to in this report is called Ngāwai Waikato, named by Jaden Fawasa there.
That's awesome.
And so most of the land that meets that criteria that's Māori owned sits in the West Coast and the Waipa. We have recently received hill country erosion funding from MPI, specifically to address that kind of land, with a component that has been allocated to working with owners of Māori-owned land blocks to co-design a farm planning process and then to implement those actions specifically on that land.
Yeah. No, I know there's the name of the project, but the work happened outside of what this committee considers as the Erohe Kaitiaki, a lot of it. So the West Coast, yes, the Upper Waipaka. Thank you.
Yeah, no, but just to confirm, sorry, Ngāwai Waikato was run in the Lower Waikato zone. So that
Okay.
was, yeah.
Lower Waikato and West Coast, you said?
Some of it was in the West Coast, some of it was in the Waipa, some of it was in the central zone. So all within the Waikato Tainui rohe.
Okay. All right. Kare tai te be, kia ora.
Right, any other questions? Oh,
Kia ora. No, thanks, awesome reporting the data. And yeah, I suppose I'm coming back to something. One of a question is, was there much funding support from WRA?
Yeah, so there's an appendix to the report which outlines where each of the co-funding came from. So, for example, for the Ngāwai or Waikato Partnership Project that I just spoke about, there was 1.66 million from the Waikato River Authority out of a total funding of $7 million. And the River Authority also contributed some funding to the Lake Mihi Restoration Project, the Opuatia Restoration Project as well. So 3 of the 5.
And I suppose what's really good about it is some of the mechanisms through the tribe and through this relationship has allowed for that to actually occur. And I'm not sure whether that messaging, how we actually messaging the value and contribution that we actually have together in these spaces, and was any of that stuff done on private land as well? So there's a messaging of that mahitahi that we're working together, and some of the messaging that comes from that Waikato River settlements, etc., like you're saying, is how can that be drawn, and what's our messaging to the public as well? Because I think there's some real key messages we can actually take from a lot of the mahi that's happening, significant mahi in our takiwa that we're working together. And I'd sort of just see the students have sort of left. And I think that this is a really good point. Like if they're actually wanting to see and hear what is co-governance, it has a whakapapa, and it comes through, and then we've got outcomes, which is all of this awesome detail. And then what and how are we messaging that to people that might not have access to a forum like this, to know what mechanisms have actually been initiated in the past to allow for this future oranga or well-being of our collective intent. So my question is how and what are we framing and messaging after this and capturing this kind of data so that people can access that? And to Tipper's point, are we encouraging the ability to collect that data, and what does it look like? So really acknowledge the mahi that's done, and I like the data that comes through, and really looking to continue the development in this space and sharing and communicating that with the public. Yes, those are some points that I'm just bringing up, and that there is value in sitting in forums like this. Pretty much David's point. Kia ora.
All right. Oh, Jackie?
Kia ora, Kerry. Thank you for the report. It's hard to believe that 3 years have passed and that these projects are almost finished. Just following on from Don's kōrero, I'm really keen to see how or understand how the Regional Council might wrap up this program, and how some comms collateral can be developed, particularly from our perspective, to show how the program and the funding has not only benefited the taiao, but our people. So really interested in understanding and getting some collateral post completion of the projects that really tells that story. I'm also interested in the capacity building opportunities and opportunities that have been created through the program. What's in place to ensure that that progress is enduring? So the contractors that our iwi businesses that have been engaged to support some of the programs, are they now on your preferred suppliers lists? Are they undertaking mahi, for regional council outside of the program? Because I think that's a really important story to tell. I'm assuming that that's the case, but it would be good to know, Kerry, if you can answer that, on how a program like this is helping to build capacity, but that capacity is now delivering BAU type mahi. So yeah, if you could answer that question first.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So just on the comms, we are planning some comms for the wrap up. We've actually got a celebration with Ngāti Hawa Mahi Trust on Thursday, which will do some comms around final planting for their project and commemorative planting there. So we'll do a story on that. And similarly, I think for the Ngāwai or Waikato project. In terms of ongoing opportunities for tribal members, it's a challenge because we don't have the same level of money, but we have applied to MPI and the Waikato River Authority and successfully gained further money to continue Ngāwai or Waikato in the lower Waikato zone. And so it'll be on a bit of a smaller scale, but the program will continue. The iwi enterprises that we have engaged throughout the delivery of that project are now approved providers. So they have all the health and safety and insurance requirements. And so they're on an as required basis that we can contract them. And so we're hoping that can continue to support those businesses and others in delivery of the project. We also continue with the internship program that we've had for Waikato Tainui interns and working on the delivery of that project. And our Waikato Tainui restoration officer that was employed for that work has just gained another job within council at the completion of his contract.
Oh, I think those are really good news stories that we need to tell, because it's I guess it's that added extra that the pūtea is delivering that will endure beyond these particular projects. Just one final question. When it comes to maintenance that might be required to ensure that these projects, remain in place and doing what they're designed to achieve, does council have budget to do that, or who's doing that?
So when we applied for the funding, we included a maintenance component within that. So for the plants, ongoing releasing and weed control. And so in most instances, our planters, our iwi enterprises who have done that work will be doing the ongoing maintenance as well. So that's just to ensure the plants get above the weeds and can be self-sustaining.
Awesome. Thank you, Kerry. I think it would be awesome if we could have a piece on the Ngāwai o Waikato and the Kamihia Lake done, as well as the Ngāti Hawa Mahi Trust.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. If there's no more questions on that. Oh, sorry, Tipa.
No, just totally supporting Jackie's and Dom's comments about the comms collateral. Just a finding we've had, again with my River Authority hat on, is it's better when other people talk about the projects rather than us saying, look at us and what we did together. So the voice of the kaitiaki would be useful there. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you.
All right, so we have a motion to receive the report. Oh, sorry, Don?
The
Yes?
chair. Just one question about the funding for 3 years is that soon to be released? Or-
So the 3-year funding for these have finished in terms of the central government contribution. But so for the Ngā Waikato project, we've got the money from MPI and the River Authority secured for another 4 years. And same with the Ngāti Haumahi Trust Partnership Project, a further 3 years for that one.
Okay, that was all.
All right, so a motion to receive the report, Don, and second, Bruce. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. All right, on to second to last, update on freshwater policy development. Who's joining us for this one? Got Peter Wishart on my list. I'm not seeing a rush for the mic.
Kia ora, Madam Chair. It appears that we don't have anyone present from policy to present this item, but I suggest we take it as read. If there are any questions, please let us know and we'll take those questions away and get answers directly to the members. We do happen to have Helen Ritchie in the room, who is actually going to facilitate the land management strategy, but if there are questions that she might be able to answer off, she's also happy to do that because Helen's involved in the freshwater stuff too. Any questions?
Great. Are there any questions from committee members on the report? Any further follow-up members would like?
Just one question,
Yes?
if I can. Tēnā koe Hela, me o mahi katoa, hapai I tēnei kaupapa. Just because we have the opportunity to speak it into the JMA and this next round of activity, what could we strengthen or support in terms of bringing the mana whenua iwi voice through?
Yep, there you go. You've got a red light. Welcome, Helen.
Tēnā tātou katoa. Tēnā koe I runga I tō pātai, Councillor Mahuta. As you'll no doubt be aware, the engagement for the freshwater is occurring in a number of streams, so community, sectors and stakeholders and tangata whenua. And at the moment they are running parallel. And in the tangata whenua space, the rōpū that they're setting up at iwi manager level or technical input level is called Ngā Tira Mātauranga. And I understand that they're underway. They've had their initial wānanga or hui, and that they are now going to be the working group, if you like, for bringing those Māori freshwater values into the fore, testing policy direction as it's developed. So I think encouraging, and I understand that the membership of that is reasonably open and all embracing. So if you have members of your hapu or kaitiaki folk that you think could add their perspectives, I would encourage that to be the main mechanism. There is also an online survey open at the moment that anyone can take, and that is open to community members and tangata whenua there. And that gives you up-to-date wording if you really want to go into the detail of what the planners have developed so far. So I could encourage people to go to the WRC website and take the feedback survey. And finally, there are going to be, in addition to the face-to-face drop-in sessions they've been holding, there are going to be 2 webinar opportunities for people to join online specifically for tangata whenua to join. And then there's a community one as well. And those are on the 24th and 25th of July from memory.
Tēnā koe, thank you, Helen.
Yeah, and then moving forward, I think the bigger conversation is how we bring all those voices together, and that's sort of live at the moment. And the team's thinking is how do we bring the parallel thinking together, because ultimately those are the conversations that we need to have as a wider hapori community of people interested in the well-being of our freshwater. So any thoughts you guys have on that would be very welcome, but we're thinking about that as we move through the rest of this year and the policy refinement process occurs.
Any other questions, either for Helen or the committee members would like noted for response? Okay.
Kia ora, Helen.
Kia ora.
Just a question around ngā tira mātauranga, and is it te tira mātauranga that's been established to support the Te Ture Whaimana review? Are they the same rōpū or are they separate rōpū?
Oh, that's a very good question. I'm not across the review of Te Ture Whaimana, so I would have to leave that question to someone more knowledgeable. I know this one's definitely called Ngā Tira Mātauranga, and that was intentional to bring all of the iwi voices together across all the region. Do you guys know?
Sorry, do we have commentary from
I
the?
guess just a kōrero from me. It would be good to align as much as possible the Te Ture Whaimana review and this review, even if they're separate hui, just coordinate that kōrero so that they're feeding into each other, and ideally the Te Ture Whaimana review comments feeding directly into the plan review. I do have a number of questions, but I'll just take those offline. But one that I did want to raise here is just the decision-making structure and what the current thinking is around that, whether the intention is to pick up on the same approach that was taken for Plan Change 1 or a different approach.
It's not either within my knowledge, sorry.
Right, we'll note that and back to the committee with further enlightenment on that. All right, any other questions to note? If not, we will.
Piece of paper.
Yes, Tippa, are you good? Are you happy to move that?
Yes.
And have we got a second? Jackie, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Helen. So just so committee members are aware, so item 10 in your agenda is called Co-Managed Land Management Strategy. That's on page 48. That is the work that we will be covering in our workshop after the end of this meeting. Did you have a question? Sorry.
When you're finished, Madam Chair, I'd like to make a comment about something.
Sure. So we've got that workshop. So the final item to cover off within our official meeting is the action points. That's item 11 on page 65. Not sure who is speaking to this. Ollie?
I'm happy to address this item, but I'll simply take it as read and answer any questions that members might have about the actions within the list. Thank you.
Any questions within that? No.
Just a partai around the protocols being developed with Office of the King and how that's progressing, and yeah, whether there are any issues with completing that sooner rather than later.
Kia ora koutou, Kalia. For this particular action, our intention is to seek some support and guidance from Te Ha o Te Whenua o Kirikiriroa. We've entered into a memorandum of understanding with them, and that includes the opportunity to engage services with them. And so we thought it would be a useful a piece of work for them to help us with, just to support us in the development of those protocols. And then the intent would be to share a draft set of protocols with Waikato Tainui staff to get some further input and I guess support, advice. And if this group would like it, we could also bring it to the co-governance table for input and feedback. So that's the plan. Any thoughts, any feedback on that?
Don might be better to kōrero on this, but I think it would make sense to just check in with the office that they're comfortable with that approach. Just so you're checking in the whole way along.
Yeah. Right.
So, and just one final follow up, the site visits. So I think there was an attempt made to organise those. It didn't happen. It would be good to have another attempt and maybe roll in the completion of some of the projects that we've just talked about, just to see some of the good work out there.
All right. If, sorry, do I need a motion? No, I do not. All right. Noel, did you have a comment you wanted to?
Yeah, just for information, really, and I'm not sure whether the members, Tainui members know, but tomorrow council will be discussing a paper, a recommendation coming up from ICM, Integrated Catchment. At the inception of council, we settle on our committees with the caveat that the likes of subcommittees relating to river and drainage were looked at. We had significant representation from landowners to retain those committees. So we have met with landowners and others. And the recommendation from ICM tomorrow will be that the two committees are reconstituted, covering both drainage and rivers, one for Lower Waikato and one for the Piako Waihau area. And one of the issues that we have discussed strongly was that previously we've had representation from iwi on those committees, and it's proposed that an invitation, if this is adopted tomorrow, will include two Tainui members on the Lower Waikato committee. So if you weren't aware of that, as individuals, understand there was supposed to be some communication coming through. I'm not sure of the timing of that, but it's just a heads up now that we are looking to hopefully get that through tomorrow and get those committees up and running, certainly before Christmas. Thank you.
Tipa, did you have a comment?
Thank you for that update, Noel. Forgot that. No, mine was just because I have to leave shortly. Could I just say two things on the co-managed land review? Through you, Madam Chair. One thing is, I think, again, we need to improve the data for this next period of management. And the assumption made when the co-governed lands, the land we're administering together, initially was that it would stay under council and we would participate. But given what's happened in other areas now with different drainage groups and that taking over their own aspirations over areas, I'm wondering if we can broaden the scope where iwi might want to increase their contact with those lands and identify opportunities for that to express relationship. So ka waiho ki reira. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right. So with that, we'll close our formal meeting at this point. Who would like to close for me? Don? Oh,
Kia ore mihi ana kia koutou katau nā ringa hāpai mo tēnei o tātou nei takiwa. Ngā mahi kua hora nei. Ko te tūmanako, whakarongo ana koutou ki era o mātou nei hia kia tūtuki pai ai a mātou nei whakaaro. So just saying what shared is hopefully grasped and taken on board that we can move forward together. Mihi ana, e tūwhera ana koutou tō koutou whare. Mā tātou I tēnei watone mo tēnei o nā hui huinga kōrero. Mai a tātou nei whānau, tēnei o takiwa a mātou nei marae maha, Waikato tainui, kia koutou tēnei no te mihi kia koutou katoa I tēnei wā. Koutou te whare, tēnei no te mihi. Kia koutou ki rungi I o tātou nei Zooms, mihi kawana kia koutou katoa hoki. Pai whakaro ana kia rātou kua mene ati ki te pō, tātou te ao mārama, tēnei te mihi kia koutou katoa, wana kia koe tō whare, mā koutou anō e whaka.
Tēnā koe Donald, kia koutou katoa no, rere from ka oti tō tātou hui I nai nei ki e noi tātou. Unuhia mai, uru tapu nui, kia wātea, kia māma, kia ngā kau, te tinana, te hene ngaro. I te ara takatū, kia rā e rongo e whakaerea ake ki runga, kia tīna, haumie, hui e, ka iki e.
Thank you, committee members. We'll declare the meeting closed at 11:54.
Because you've got the separate. Gives the references in it.
Yeah, it's all for tomorrow.